Okay, in this assignment you are simplifying the expression. You are not solving for what the letter equals, none of that. You simplify it. So in the first problem here we have a to the 6th power divided by a to the 2nd power. So there's a fraction line there. Well, there's two things we need to think about at this stage in the game in this unit. You look at the top, just ignore the bottom, a to the 6th power. So the power is 6, so the only factor you got is a. And it's a to the 6th power. No, don't have to do the in-out multiplication. Now on bottom, you have the 2nd power, base is a. Now, you have matching variables, okay? You need to get rid of one of your a's. It's the one with the smaller exponent. And I subtract 2, 6 minus 2 is 4, okay? Alright, a to the 4th power cannot be simplified, so that's your answer. Okay, now in the second problem we have a parentheses, and inside we have a fraction. On top of the fraction we have b, on the bottom of the fraction we have the variable c, and then outside of the parentheses we have a 7th power, okay? So, on top, ignore the bottom, you have a factor of b, okay? Now the b is to the 1 power if it doesn't have an exponent. We have to do the inside-outside multiplication, so 1 times 7 is 7. Then under the line we have c, and that's also to the 1 power, but that's also in parentheses, so I do 1 times 7, and that's 7. Now on top you can't simplify because you just have b to the 7th, and likewise on bottom that's c to the 7th. Okay, next problem. We have a fraction line. On top we have b to the 3rd, b to the 5th, and on bottom we have b to the 4th. So, first off, let's talk about the top. We have exponents of 3rd and 5th. So b and b, I put operators in, b times b. So we have two factors of b this time. Well, I just want to write one factor of b. I don't really want to recreate the wheel. So we have two factors of b, so what I do with these b factors, the b on the left has a 3 exponent, and then I put plus, and the b on the right has a 5 exponent, so it's 3 plus 5, that's 8. Now bottom you have b to the 4th, okay? So you have also have a factor of b on bottom, so when you go to the bottom you start over again. And the b there is to the 4th power. So b to the 8th, b to the 4th. So we cross out the b with the smaller exponent, and we subtract that exponent from the other side. So 8 minus 4 gives me 4. So b to the 4th. Okay, right here you have a parentheses. Inside you have a division line, you have 3 on top, b on bottom. Then you have a 2nd power. Okay, so on top you have a factor of 3, and it's to the 1st power, and then we take 1 times 2, that's 2. Okay, then on bottom you have a factor of b, you got a 1 times 2, that's also 2. So 3 to the 2nd power, okay, so you need to figure out what 3 times 3 actually is. You can simplify that, that's 9. Then on bottom you have b to the 2nd power, so that will just remain the same. 9 over b to the 2nd power. Okay, my next expression, I have a parentheses with a division line. I have 3 on top and b on bottom, with a 2nd power outside. Okay, so on top I have a factor of 3. It's to the 1st power, but it's in parentheses, so you have to do the in-out multiplication. 1 times 2 is 2. Then on bottom you have b, okay, 1st power, you have to do inside-outside multiplication. 1 times 2 is 2. So 3 to the 2nd power on top can be simplified. Yeah, that would be 9, okay? So 3 times 3. And bottom b to the 2nd. 9 over b to the 2nd. Okay, next problem. I have x underline divided by y to the 6th power. Okay, on top you got x, and it's x to the 1st. So you got to do the in-out multiplication. It's 6. 1 times 6. Then on bottom you have a y that's also to the 1st power, but that's also in parentheses, so you have to take 1 times 6, and that's 6. Now x to the 6 can't be simplified on top, and neither can y to the 6, so then both of the factors just end up to the 6th power on the fraction. Okay, next problem. I have a parentheses. I have a division line inside of it. On top of the division line we have 5x. In the denominator of the division line we have y. And then outside we have a 3rd power. Okay. Alright, so let's talk about the top. 5 and x, that's 5 times x. So we have a 5 times an x. So the 5 is to the 1st power, and we got to take, it's inside of parentheses, so we got to do the in-out multiplication. 1 times 3 is 3. Then x is to the 1 power, you got to again do the inside-outside multiplication. 1 times 3 is 3. Now on bottom you got y to the 1st, so you take 1 times 3, that's 3. Okay, you can't cross out anything because you don't have anything that matches on top. You have a y on bottom, but you don't have that on top. So on top, 5 to the 3rd, x to the 3rd. 5 to the 3rd I can simplify. That is 125. X to the 3rd you can't. Y to the 3rd you cannot simplify. Okay, on the next one, we have c to the 3rd power divided by 5b, and then a 3rd power outside. Okay, again, you have a fraction line, c to the 3rd. Underneath it, you have 5b, and then you have a 3rd power outside. So these are my exponents in the problem. I will be inserting some ones here in a bit. So on top of the division line, you just have the factor of c. Now c is to the 3rd. There's a 3 outside, so you got to do the in-out multiplication, 9. Now on bottom you got 5 times b. So 5 is to the 1, okay, and then we take 1 times 3, that's 3. Then b is to the 1, 1 times 3, that's 3. Okay, so c to the 9th really cannot simplify. 5 to the 3rd can, okay. So it becomes 125, and then b to the 3rd. Okay, now the next one, we have a thing. You have a division line. You have 5x to the 3rd, y to the 4th, and you have 4xy. You have a 3rd power outside. Okay, so on the division line, you've got 5 times x times y. Okay. Remember, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 3rd are all powers. So 5 times x times y. So now the 5, I put a given power of 1, and then 1 times 3 is 3. Then the x, 3 times 3 is 9, and then on the 4th, 4 times 3 is 12. Okay. Now in the denominator you have 4xy, so that's 4 times x times y. Now let's talk about the 4. So 4 is to the 1. You need to, it's still in parentheses. It might be on the bottom, but the bottom stuff's in the parentheses too, so you got to do the inside-outside multiplication. 1 times 3 is 3. And this x here, 1 times 3 is 3. And the y is to the 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, now you have a 4 on bottom, you don't have that on top. You have an x on bottom, x on top, get rid of the x on the bottom, okay? Minus 3, and that's going to be 6. Okay, y to the 12th, y to the 3rd. So you can take away the y to the 3rd and you subtract 3, you end up with y to the 9th. Okay, now on top you have 5 to the 3rd, x to the 6th, y to the 9th. Well, we can simplify 5 to the 3rd. That's 5 times 5 times 5, and that's going to equal 125. So we replace this factor with 125 over here. These variables just trail. X to the 6th times y to the 9th. Now in the denominator we have 4 to the 3rd, which obviously can be simplified. So 4 times 4 times 4 equals 64. There's nothing we can multiply on top, okay? And at the bottom we're just going to have 64, and then we just leave that as a fraction. Don't do anything with these two. They're not multiplied, they're divided, but just leave it as a fraction. Okay, my next problem, I have first I have a division line or a fraction, whatever you want to call it. On top you have 5x y to the 3rd. Okay, that's a third. And on bottom you have x to the 4th, y to the 2nd, times. And then another fraction. Now on top I have a parentheses, but it's just on top. 4xy, and after the parentheses is closed you have a 4th power. In the denominator you have xy. Okay, now we can go ahead. Remember, if you have one fraction, if you have multiple fractions, you can just combine it into one. So let's go across the top. 5 times x times y, 4 times x times y. So the factors I have on top are 5xy, 4xy. Remember, you just need to write x and y once on the top, or treat the top and bottom like they're two, do them one at a time. You start all over on bottom, but top. 5xy, 4xy. So I go 5 times x times y times 4, but I do not repeat that. Okay, so 5's to the first. I do not do the inside-outside multiplication because it's not in parentheses, it's just to the first. Now x to the first. Don't need to do that to the first. And also there's another factor of x. So before you start with the 5, you know, there's only one factor of 5. But when you go to the x, there's 2 factors of x. So you're going to need to add. So you got 1 plus, and then this x you got to apply the in-out multiplication. 1 times 4 is 4. So 1 plus 4 is 5. Okay, now we also have 2 factors of y on top. So this y is to the 3rd plus, and this y right here, 1 times 4 is 4. So 3 plus 4 is 7. Okay, then 4 to the 1, that's in parentheses, 1 times 4 is 4. Okay, now let's start on the bottom. Bottom we have x times y, x times y, okay. So you have a factor of x, okay, times a factor of y, and then just another x, another y. So I start with x. Now x has 2 factors on bottom, okay, 2 factors on bottom. So that's x to the 9th, okay. Don't need to do the in-out on that, plus, then the other x is to the 1st. I do not need to do the inside-outside because there's not the parentheses is only there, not there. So it's just 9 plus 1, which would be 10. So I'll put a 10 there. Okay, then the y, okay, there's 2 factors of y. You have a 2 plus, and then 1. So 2 plus 1 is 3. Okay, so you got an x on bottom, you have an x on top as well. So the x, you get rid of the smaller one, the x to the 5th, and then you minus the 5 from the 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5. So that is x to the 5, just put a 5 there. And then we have y to the 7th, y to the 3rd. Well, y to the 3rd is smaller, so that's one I get rid of, and I subtract there. So 7 minus 3 is 4. Okay, so on top we have 5 to the 1st, y to the 4th, and 4 to the 4th. So I can simplify the 5 to the 1st and the 4 to the 4th. So 5 to the 1st is just 5, And 4 to the 4th is 4 times 4 times 4 times 4, which gives me a product of 256. So I have this, so this just turns into 5, and this factor here just turns into 256, and then this factor here, y to the 4th, remains the same. Now at bottom you have x to the 5th. Now you can multiply these two on top. After you look at your after you have this done, is there anything you can multiply on top? Yeah, there is. 5 times 256. That gives me a product of 1,280. Just scribble it out there and just put 1280. Okay, and then my last problem here in today's video. So I have a parentheses, and inside the parentheses we have a division line. On top of the parentheses you have 6 p to the 4th and then q. On bottom you have 3 p to the 2nd. Close parentheses, then times, and then another parentheses. Inside you have a division line. You have p q to the 3rd, and under the line you have 2p. And outside there's a third power, so it's 1. So these are your exponents, okay? So remember, combine it into one fraction. Okay, so on top, 6 times p, p times q. And also p times q here. So on top I got 6p, q, p, q. So I have a 6, a p, a q, another p, and another q. Once I've already written p and q down, don't write them again. Okay, we'll go to the bottom as soon as we get the top squared up. Now, you don't see an x. This 1 here is in parentheses, but there's nothing to distribute it to, so you can put a 1, and you can just take 1 times 1. It's 1, okay? Then I go to the p. Okay, now there's 2 factors of p, here and here. I don't worry about the bottom yet. Bottoms is when we start over. It's basically you start the process over. So plus. So 1 times 1 is 1. Then p, you have a 1. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 plus 3 then is 4. Everything's going to need to have the in-out rule because all that's in a parentheses in one form or another. Then q, there's 2 factors of q, right here and right here. So 1 times 1 is 1, plus, and then 3, inside outside rule please, okay, 1 times 3 is 3, so 1 plus 3 is 4. Okay, now downstairs in the bottom, you've got a 3 times a p times a 2 times another p. So I go 3 times p times 2, and then I'm not going to write p down again, okay? Remember, there's just 2 factors of it. So 3 to the 1, it's parentheses around that, so 1 times 1 is 1, okay? Then the p, that's a 2, but you got to in out. 2 times 1 is 2. I guess it really wouldn't matter when you're multiplying it by 1. And there's another p here, don't lose sight of that. 1 times 3 is 3. So if you have 2 factors on the bottom or on the top of the same thing, you need to add the powers. 2 plus 3 is 5. And on the 2, we have a 1. 1 times 3 is 3. Okay. So in the numerator, we have 6 to the 1st, p to the 4th, q to the 4th. Well, you can simplify the 6 to the 1st. That would just be 6. In the denominator, 3 to the 1st times p to the 5th times 2 to the 3rd. 3 to the 1st and 2 to the 3rd, both of those need to be simplified. So 3 to the 1st is just going to give us 3. 2 to the 3rd, that would be 2 times 2 times 2, which would equal 8. So this changes to 3, and then this factor here will change it to 8. And then this p to the 5th is my trailer. Oh shoot, I forgot something pretty important too. I screwed this up, okay? I need to be looking to cross out. I have a p to the 4th, a p to the 5th. We need to get rid of the p to the 4th, okay? So minus 4, and that's 1, okay? So this is gone, and then p to the 1st, my bad. I just forgot that. I'm very sorry about that. Okay, so is there anything you can multiply on top? Nope. Anything you can multiply on bottom? Yeah, 3 times 8 makes 24. Sorry about that, guys. So it's 6 times q to the 4th over 24 times p to the 1st.